The online troll. Once upon a time, there was this thing called the internet. And much like the Romans when they built the roads, and they had no idea what eventually would come along them, when Sir Tim Berners-Lee created the internet, he had little idea what it would bring. He envisaged it as a resource available for everybody. And, whilst there are many good things about it, there are also many bad things. The internet has allowed you to turn the heating on in your house from a remote location. It allows you to order packages from people all around the world. It allows you to shop. It allows you to interact with people, listen to music, share your creations. Along came social media. Along came a means of talking, seeing, involving yourself with other people from the comfort of your own home. The ability to stream films, football matches, and so much more. And, of course, the availability of pornographic material at the click of a mouse. No longer was it necessary for a furtive visit to the sex shop, or, as a teenage boy, hoping to happen upon a discarded bongo mag in a hedgerow somewhere. Instead, porn was available on tap. But also, along with the internet, came the concept of the online troll. Hitherto, the troll did not really exist. Forums for debate tended either to be a live televised discussion or a recorded one, perhaps attendance at a debating society or a forum, or the usual letter from Disgusted of Tunbridge Wells in the paper of on the pages of a national newspaper. Speed could only be afforded in person. There was not the multiplicity utilised by telephone debate. And where it came to the written word, of course, this necessitated exchange through letters, through mail, and thus was slow. But then came the internet, and where there was the ability to pass comment about somebody's view, somebody's creation, somebody's snip, somebody's picture of their child or their birthday cake, along came the opportunity to instantaneously pass an adverse comment, and thus the troll crawled out from underneath its bridge. But who is this troll? What are they? The troll is, of course, somebody that makes repeated, unpleasant, nasty, provocative comments to other people. This might just manifest in terms of being obtuse when discussing a point, seemingly unable to grasp the point that the other person is making, and descending into ad hominem attacks, personal attacks, against the individual. Childish, petulant, ridiculous. In other instances, it is picking on a particular attribute of an individual and harnessing it. So, for example, some of you may have heard of a former celebrity called Katie Price, also known as Jordan, and she had a son with a footballer called Dwight York, and her son Harvey suffered various disabilities, and he was a very large, and still is a very large child, but was particularly large when he was a baby and a young child. And online trolls would mock her with regard to his size and the fact that she might be raped by her own son. Unsavoury comments that were made, unpleasant, ones lacking emotional empathy. But who is behind all of this? You may have experienced being trolled yourself, somebody repeating sustained attacks against you in a forum, mocking you for some attribute of yours, in the same way that the attributes of her son's disability, the fact that he was particularly oversized, was used against him in an unpleasant sexual way towards his own mother, with the example I've explained appertaining to Katie Price. You will have seen it happen to other people. You will have probably experienced it yourself. What is behind all of this? Well, first of all, do empaths engage in trolling behaviours? The answer to that is no. An empath might become unpleasant, may lash out, they may, as a consequence, make unpleasant remarks, But they will only do so in circumstances where they have suffered an erosion of their emotional empathy. The empath does not sit down behind a keyboard and rub their hands and start firing the machine gun of nasty comments towards anybody and everybody. No, they will engage in constructive debate. Their views may not necessarily be accurate, but they are not formed from a place of entitlement. They're not formed from a place of a lack of emotional empathy. And instead, even though their position might be misguided, they will debate in a relatively constructive and fair manner, guided by their emotional empathy. Of course, if somebody keeps going at them and at them and at them, certain empaths, that results, because it's an external stressor, in the reduction of their emotional empathy, with the consequence that they will lash out at that individual. But they don't lash out at everybody on that forum, just the one particular person that is provoking them, and they may respond with some choice words. Alternatively, they effectively impose no contact and choose to ignore them. But invariably, they do so too late, after they've been on the receiving end of unpleasant comments, where they've perhaps tried to reason with this individual to make them see sense with regard to the ridiculousness of their argument, the nastiness of their comments, and to no avail. And thus, with their own emotional empathy then eroded, they may well turn around and lash out against their protagonist. But empathic individuals do not engage in the habitual behaviour that is online trolling. Who does this then leave us with? Well, it leaves us with narcissistic, normal, and narcissists. You may think that it's fairly obvious that online trolls are narcissists, and indeed you'd be correct. Many of them are. It's quite simply this. When the narcissist asserts a view and somebody disagrees with it, no matter how well reasoned, that narcissist suffers the receipt of challenge fuel, and their control is inherently and unconsciously threatened by the individual disagreeing with them. An articulate and educated narcissist with a high cognitive function would assert control in a manner of demonstrating charm, reference to evidence, and correct the inaccuracy, and deal with it that way. But a less evolved one, with a lower cognitive function, and the immediate need to assert control, not knowing what they are, responds with insult, with blame shifting, with provocation, with nasty put-downs, forms of triangulation. Responding with deluded observations, responding with non-existent evidence, shifting to an ad hominem attack, perhaps looking at the profile picture of the person that has commented and making an unpleasant comment about their facial features, the size of their ears, or describing them as being ugly. Perhaps even going and looking on their page and commenting about saying, well, you would say that, seeing as you live with sheep. The narcissist has their control threatened by the comment made by the other individual, and as a consequence of that, unconsciously needs to assert control, and therefore they do so through a particular manipulation which is not particularly cultured, sophisticated, or subtle, and they lash out. And that is one form of the online troll, the narcissist responding in that way. In other instances, their narcissist control might be threatened by somebody proximate to them, but they're not able to assert control, and therefore there is a transference of the behaviour, which is then placed upon random strangers on the internet. Basically, they become the recipients of the narcissist's need to assert control over somebody else by provoking them to draw fuel from them and to make the narcissist in effect feel better. By picking on somebody else because they couldn't deal with the person proximately, they basically take it out on somebody else. And again, this all derives from the narcissist's need for control. The person in their private life has challenged them. They have not been successfully able to assert control over that individual, but they withdraw from them, which allows an assertion of control, but they perhaps have had their fuel levels diminished by wounding. They need to get fuel, and driven by their paranoia, they go on the internet because it's a very fast and easy way of drawing fuel, admittedly not large amounts because it's just the written word, and they start to troll people. They take it out on other people, They assert control over those other people, and they draw fuel from all of the reactions from individuals. They go fishing for a bite. They look to get somebody on the hook. They look to provoke them with a kind of whoosh. Those and similar phrases are applicable to those individuals. And therefore, many online trolls are narcissists exhibiting the narcissistic dynamic of experiencing a threat to control and thus having to nullify that threat through a base manipulation of insult, provocation, triangulation, denial, deflection, all for the purposes of causing hurt and upset because that provides fuel and signals control. But are all online trolls narcissists? The answer to that is no. Many are, but also numerous online trolls are normals. Normals do have emotional empathy, and they are a bundle of narcissistic and empathic traits. However, their emotional empathy only extends to a small group of people. Their parents, their children, their siblings, some friends, neighbour, colleagues. It doesn't extend to a complete stranger on the internet. And that is what enables a normal person to behave in an online troll way, because they have no emotional empathy for the person that they're dealing with. It isn't the case that that normal individual has to habitually assert control, but when somebody disagrees with them about something, that causes that normal person to feel less. They don't like to be proven wrong. People don't like to be proven wrong per se. Where that's a narcissist, that affects control. But with a normal person, there's a degree of embarrassment or shame at having been shown to be wrong. And because there is an absence of emotional empathy for the person that has provoked that shame or embarrassment, the normal then responds with an unpleasant comment. There is no emotional empathy to restrain them from doing so, and thus they engage in the online trolling. Some online trolls, of course, are young children, lacking the maturity to regulate their behaviour, and also an absence of emotional empathy, because they again are dealing with strangers. That they find it entertaining and funny to wind people up. And that's all they see it as. They are unable, because they have no emotional empathy for that stranger, the normal person is unable to realise that this could really be upsetting somebody. And instead, they just find it amusing and entertaining to get a rise out of somebody. They will often dismiss it of, it's just banter, it was just a joke, don't get so worked up about it. And therefore, a lot of the online trolling that takes place is undertaken by misguided normals who have no emotional empathy for the person that they're interacting with. The more savage nature, the more sustained and nasty type comes from the narcissist, where the real, disgusting, unpleasant comments that occur on an habitual and sustained basis are as a consequence of the narcissist's threat to control being affected, and therefore they respond. And also, like the normal, the narcissist has no emotional empathy for the person that they're dealing with. The difference is, the normal doesn't need to assert control. They are just lashing out because they're embarrassed, hurt, feel silly because they've been corrected, proven wrong, or somebody disagrees with them. And their absence of emotional empathy causes them to troll, because they perhaps lack the intellectual capacity to engage in a rational debate, pointing to the evidence to prove their point and perhaps to correct the other individual. So they have to fall back into name-calling, insults, smearing, slandering. And that's driven by an absence of emotional empathy and a lack of intellectual capability to have a sustainable and constructive argument. With the narcissist, the behaviour of online trolling is driven by the need to assert control, the need to nullify threats to control, the need to obtain fuel. And underpinning all of that is an absence of emotional empathy, so that both normal and narcissist feel nothing for the person that they're insulting. However, the driver behind that behaviour is different for the normal than it is from the narcissist. And that is where the online trolls come from. And that is why there are so many of them, because they're not just drawn from the ranks of narcissists, they're also drawn from the ranks of normals as well. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.